All right, welcome. My name is Russell Berg. I'm the General Manager of Product and Emerging Technology for Quanton. This is the second podcast in a special three-part content series. Part one addressed the growth in the global robotic process automation market, and this week we're going to explore how automation will support businesses through the coming challenges associated with coronavirus and the impending recession. The three key areas we're going to talk about today are productivity, business resilience, and jobs. To help us with this conversation, I'd like to introduce Garry Green. Garry Green is the founder of Quanton. He was involved in the inception of New Zealand's first RPA program. His very early career, he spent 20 years in the UK Air Force. And as a fun fact, Garry, I hope you can verify this for me. I'm pretty sure you said you were a spokesman for NATO at one point.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. It's good to be here.
Nice. Right, so do you want to start by sharing your perspective on some of the challenges created for businesses as a result of coronavirus and what you believe some of the silver linings are?
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I mean, obviously the impact of coronavirus globally has been unprecedented, and the responses have been kind of varied around the world. I guess for New Zealand, we went into a rapid lockdown, which meant businesses had to change their operating models overnight. Unfortunately, there's some businesses that involve close human contact that effectively have shut and closed. And obviously, as restrictions ease, there's the ability for those businesses to start to trade again. I guess more in the service area and essential area of businesses have continued. And I guess it's for those businesses, they've had to rapidly go to a remote working model. Interesting, they will have activated their business continuity plans and that they've been IT enabled. But equally, a mass migration of people to centralized office-based working to remote working's seen a fundamental change. It's taken some people quite a bit of time to adjust, and businesses as well. Some have been up and running a lot quicker. But equally, I guess the thing is, it's where people have often challenged home working, or it's seen as a bit of a stigma. Now it's the new norm. And there's a lot of people that some are enjoying it, some will be glad to go back into an office environment. But it offers businesses a lot more flexibility in their workforce, the geography of the workforce, and then also the productivity of people. If they don't have to commute, it's suddenly a lot less pressure on infrastructure as well. And we've certainly seen in the media an article about Optus that are going to continue with remote working and move their contact center business model to a remote working model, which is quite interesting.
I think what's interesting about that, though, is not most businesses, especially larger businesses, their processes are built around supporting a centralized on-premise operating model, whereas what you've described is we've moved rapidly to a dispersed workforce working from home. So the processes that we use, and a good example to go to, an easy one might be health and safety. The processes that we're using to support our business model aren't necessarily directly applicable to this change, right? So there's quite a bit of change for businesses to go through there to adjust those processes and that new way of working.
Yeah, I think it's also an acceptance, because before, having Zoom meetings, you could do video meetings, but it was always seen as a last resort, where now it's the primary means of communication. All of a sudden, you're going, actually, if people don't have to commute, they gain back an hour and a half a day. If for a meeting, they don't have to travel halfway across town or halfway across the country, big productivity gain. And actually, often finding that meetings are actually shorter and more focused, so you're actually gaining time back. But it's also, you can, link teams literally together all over the country or globally as well. So I think there's a lot of developments there that are really interesting. Equally now, when we look at teams that are remote working, it's how do you ensure they're productive? And I think when we've moved rapidly to a remote working model, there's probably efficiencies and harmonizations that we have to do there. So I think there's an opportunity there for businesses now to start to leverage those models and how you can kind of build upon that.
In separate conversations, you've talked about how businesses are going to face new challenges in the post-coronavirus environment. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I think I mean, there's no debate about this now, but we will go into recession. It's just how deep and how long, and different industries will be impacted around that. And unfortunately, recession, access to capital reduces, the ability to borrow reduces. There's cost pressure on businesses to control the cost and how they operate. Uh, Businesses don't spend as much, discretionary spending goes down. So it becomes a very tough environment. Also in recession, capability being lost and capacity can be lost, depends how long the recession goes on. And it's knowing that that is coming. Businesses have got to look at how they can be in the best shape going forward. And there's a lot of measures they can take around, you know, within how they're going to operate, where they need to focus their activity and efforts on. And there's definitely a redistribution of where you put resources within your business and where you invest within the business and where you don't. When you come out of recession, it's then we're into a new environment as well, competitive. So you've got to preserve the capacity that you believe you're going to need coming out the other side. So that makes some difficult choices as you go forward. And I guess on the productivity side, that, you know, we need to ensure that businesses are productive for that. And there's traditionally New Zealand as well, we've been not the most productive and have, you know, way behind the rest of the world due to management practices, access to capital, investment, leveraging new technology and IT. And I think that if we're going to a recessionary environment, we do have to look at how we can actually leverage some of those technologies as well as new practices, because old ways of doing stuff before COVID and before a recession just won't cut it going forward. We've also got the exponential change in technology that's putting additional pressure on.
So it's interesting you step into productivity, and I want to draw reference to a 2019 report by the New Zealand Productivity Commission. And as some key points out of that, they basically said New Zealand's productivity has been traditionally poor. So this isn't our perception, right? This is, I guess, a fact from New Zealand. New Zealand's productivity growth over the last decade has slowed to 1% annually, which is below the long-running average of 1.5%. And our productivity is below the top half of all countries measured by the OECD, which is really saying that, you know, we are lagging behind the rest of the world. Another key fact in there is that New Zealand's services sector represents 67% of New Zealand's total economy. So it's clearly important, and you've already made this point, that getting productivity up for the service sector is critical. But you've also said, you know, that there's a lot of blocks to that. So what do you see some of those blocks being?
I mean, some of the blocks are investment in the right technology. And I guess some of that comes down to understanding how it can be applied to businesses, how it can help create new ways of working, how it can increase productivity and gain, and how you actually realize those benefits as gains. Also linked to that is if you're going to invest in new technology, invest in the right technology. There's a tradition of a DIY approach in the Great Wire in New Zealand. And while that's laudable, it's sometimes useful to leverage expertise and experience to give you that step change in your capability. Still have an organic capability afterwards, but do it in partnership with someone that knows, has got deep experience in those areas. The other areas around access to capital, a lot of, you know, small medium businesses are bootstrapped by the owners, and traditionally New Zealand would not necessarily have the best access to capital. You can debt fund or access, you know, capital through various funds and so on. But again, that's also hampered us the ability to leverage that. Yeah, so that's a few of the areas. I think that even with a background for productivity, there's some of the one of the other areas is also managerial practices, and again, some of the blocks of we have a resistance to change. I guess with a crisis like COVID, some of those blocks are being pushed to the side because there's now a burning platform that means people will move quickly and can see what the dangers are. I think it's very important to leverage that going forward, that we can use this to really help our productivity. we could look at some of the changes that are needed within businesses to make them more productive, make them more efficient, and that people probably got a more of a willingness to accept change because it's either change or wither.
What's your advice to businesses, right? So if someone out here is listening and agreeing with you completely that we've got to get productivity up inside a business, how does someone start approaching that? Like, where would you, how would you approach that, and where would you be looking? What kind of initiatives would you be looking at?
I think it's understand what the market is that you're going to be operating in, what the competitive landscape is, but also within your own business, if you're not sure where the productivity gains need to be made or how you can do them, is speak to someone that can help. And there's yourselves and others out there that can help with that. It's education as well. Yes, there's a lot of technologies out there, but technology on its own won't solve the problem, because ultimately, if you're going to change your productivity and how you do your business, it's transformational. That's not easy. You need support and advice and the right people around you to do that. And it is a big leadership challenge, but it's not insurmountable. It's, if you have the right tools, support, mentoring around that. The technology is kind of secondary, because it's, you've got to get the change management right and the leadership right to drive it forward. And then the technology just is an enhancement and a way of systemizing some of those changes.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was talking with Martin Milthorpe in the part one of this content series, that's actually one of the points he made, that he was referring to Australasian businesses when he said this, but we don't do change well. And traditional change was based on processes, technology, and people, and they were the three pillars. And you've, in our previous conversations, you've added the fourth pillar, which is data, and I really agree with that. And I think one of the key points is that you have to address all of those holistically to effectively change, because if you leave one or more of those parts out, you're not going to effectively achieve change. You're only going to create more barriers and more pain for the business. Is that something you'd agree with?
Absolutely. And I think it's that thing that you can weave all of those together. The change management, transformation, all the good tools around that, and the vision, the roadmap, etc., and how you do the change and take people along the way are absolutely vital. Having the right technology tools to support that as well are important, that will embed it. But again, the other link is data, information, knowledge. And it's how you can leverage that now, because we are going to a data-driven economy. And not just what has happened, but also forecasting, decisioning for the future. And in your activities that you're doing, you're going to have more and more data available as to how you're performing, and the ability to, if you are going down a new path, you're getting feedback and the ability to monitor that and make pivots really quickly.
Where do you see automation fitting into this conversation, right? We're talking about productivity. How does automation relate to that in the current environment?
I think automation can do many things if it's utilized properly. Its greatest impact is going to, if you deliver it strategically to the business, it's aligned with the strategy of the business and the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And whether that's going into a new market, growing revenue, growing top line, bottom line, customer satisfaction, customer intimacy, it can help with all of those, compliance. And so I think that it's around, in fact, if you take cost control, automation can be used to actually help reduce the cost in areas by moving mundane tasks to software robots, standardizing what you do, etc., freeing up capacity in people to deal with higher value tasks, customer interactions, more complex problems, because not all processes are suitable to be automated, or should you. The other side is productivity, that actually, if you automate an area, you can actually do things differently. You can actually start to increase the service levels, and whereby you might have had 5 people working in an area that you then automate some of the processes. Suddenly, you can massively increase the throughput in that area. Equally, even though exceptions, and the same number of people can handle the exceptions or actually handle what you're doing. So, and also if you're looking at expanding certain areas in the business, you can throw automation at it. Or if you've got surges of activity, certainly at the moment we're seeing COVID that some industries, government and banking, have been inundated with applications for changes to loans, financial packages, etc., etc. And there's backlogs there that's perfect for automation to handle and deal with those, as well as you change your business model. You may have seasonal peaks as well that you're dealing with, or the ability to respond quicker to crisis situations.
I think one of the key messages for me in that conversation is that there are businesses at the moment who are somewhat being forced to change their processes in a very reactive way to meet current demand, right? Like we've had to move to dispersed remote working. The old way we did processes necessarily doesn't work, so we are looking for new ways to do processes. And I think that's a golden opportunity for businesses, not simply to find the quickest and best way to do it, but to equally take the opportunity to consider how could we really do this differently to start future-proofing our business model and to start step changing our operating model to a new way of working, right?
Yeah, that's a good point, Russell, because it gives you that flexibility now to actually, where you've only dreamt of doing some of these things, you can rapidly implement new business processes, new ways of working. And that's the other beauty of this, is this can be done very quickly. You're not talking years, months, you're talking weeks or days to bring these sorts of things in, especially when you've got to fundamentally change the way you operate and react to new market demands. It's hugely powerful and gives massive competitive advantage as well, or the ability to actually survive and then prosper.
It's actually a good segue into resilience, and you've talked about resilience being a massive factor for businesses going forward. So how is resilience, I guess, first of all, what is resilience? And second of all, how is it more important for businesses now?
Like, my definition of resilience is the ability to deal with the unexpected and still carry on. It's being robust, and that you've got a business model and supportive systems around it, or ways of working that can handle shocks. And it's the known or foreseen risks you've probably factored in, but it's the unforeseen risks. And interestingly, with the COVID crisis, everybody had, majority of businesses have business continuity plans. But what probably caught people out was even the risk people haven't forecast the pandemic. It wasn't in the top 20 of global risks, but it was the fact that it affected every part of the globe. So where businesses have operations in New Zealand, Australia, India, or the Philippines, they've got a business continuity plan that they could move capacity or functionality around. What most people hadn't foreseen was that everyone was impacted at the same time. So you've had businesses that have had the Philippine and Indian centers closed down, and then most of them have no remote working capability. So the functionality that had been offshored stopped. And we've seen some businesses have to rapidly bring that onshore and on board, and then to a dispersed workforce. So I think coming out of this, businesses are going to look a lot more closely about how they conduct their operations, and actually core activity or activity brings in revenue or supports them. They're going to have to look at how that can operate no matter what. And I think this is a golden opportunity to actually look at some of those and actually bring them onshore. You can combine automation with that. You can certainly create a lot of opportunity within New Zealand. And if we look at, obviously, tourism sector has been taking a huge hit. You've got a lot of capability there of people that are customer centric. We're looking, and again, with remote technologies, you've got a workforce across the country that you can tap into. So I think there's a golden opportunity to onshore there.
So this is a really interesting point, and it was certainly one that I wanted to expand on a lot. And we're in a time at the moment where, like, we've been talking to some degree about automation in this conversation, and there was a period not that long ago where people were worried about how automation would impact jobs, and it would be very understandable if there was a sense of renewed fear in the current business environment. And you've got a really great take on this, which you've already touched on, and the line that you've used is bring them home. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit more? Because you are talking about bringing home work, processes that have been offshored into offshore teams, and repatriating them back into the New Zealand market and back into New Zealand geography.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I accept that there's commercial arrangements and that businesses are made to offshore stuff, but and some of them take a bit of work to unpick. But my personal experience has never been good when I've had to deal with a contact center that's offshore, and because there's the culture and language challenges, as well as if you're phoning up, it's normally a bit more difficult. You know, you can't deal with it online, you can't deal with it routinely, and so so I think that people appreciate more when they're dealing with somebody that understands what they are, the problem they have and the issue. Um, I think that's obviously in this sort of thing that you go in, there's a huge amount of talent in New Zealand that you can be tapped into. And again, we're looking at leveraging remote working technologies that are already now being utilised. A number of businesses are looking to change their operating model to do that. You suddenly actually not just offshore, but actually it gives businesses the ability to actually spread jobs across the country and much more flexibility in workforce. I think the thing is as well is that the fear of automation has always been that robots will take jobs. We've certainly seen to date that we've created probably more jobs and more opportunities through leveraging automation because it creates new possibilities of what can be done. There's more service offerings, the higher level of service that can be done, and then you can do more. You can extend your hours of operation, the amount of services you offer, etc. The cost of delivering them effectively comes down because you can spread it over bots as well as a human workforce and offer a greater number of opportunities.
I think that's one of the key points there that I wanted to hear you say. And if I skip jump into a segue for a second, I think one of the key things, in terms of technology trends which is occurring is, up until this point, I think what we've seen is the human workforce and the digital workforce, and they have been quite disparate. We do talk about them coming together, but they're quite disparate. Whereas where we're seeing technology go now, and some of the functionality that's starting to come in, human in the loop being a prime example, we're seeing a far greater level of integration. And yes, those two, some stuff will go to a human workforce, some stuff will go to a digital workforce, but we're seeing a massive area of augmented automation in the middle where humans and basically automation are working in a very integrated manner. And using that combination of technology and what you said at the end of your last conversation was, this will vary depending on the business and what they're doing, but necessarily using the talent available in New Zealand in combination with automation is necessarily going to be more cost effective for businesses than their current offshoring model. That is what you're saying, right?
I absolutely, Russell, because I think that if you leverage the advantages that automation bring, combined with a local workforce and, like say, human in the loop, leveraging some of those decisioning technologies and support technologies, you can suddenly do a high level of service. And a level of service that people have paid a premium or a lot for, and was the realms of, say, one end of the spectrum in delivery, where you're democratizing a service, a high level of service, rather than homogenizing it and pushing down to a very low level of service, which we've had in the past.
So it's a triple whammy, really. Sorry, triple whammy, really. You're increasing service levels to customers. You're necessarily going to get a greater cost benefit and improved cost control, and you're driving job opportunities in New Zealand for New Zealand's workforce.
Absolutely. And I think we've got a lot of talent here we can leverage. And I think as well with that, when we've got an economy that has had one of its biggest sectors had its heart ripped out, you've got to grow the other areas of the economy. And so how can we do that? So it's coming up with ideas out of the box. And I mean, I guess people can always find a reason why not to do this, but I think but if you focus on the whys, you can overcome the no's.
Cool. So that's I think you touched on something else there. We've been talking about, I guess, offshoring, which largely relates to call centers, but I think that the essence of the conversation we've been having relates to all business models. It relates to anyone in the service sector. And you're really keen to explore that. So one of the initiatives that you've thrown yourself into is a a new ways of working think tank, and you're basically hosting an informal think tank conversation around, I guess around that. Do you want to share a little bit more with us about that initiative?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are trying to think what we need to do in a post-COVID lockdown environment, and again, just with our interactions with customers and clients, we've got some insights into some of the challenge they're facing, as well as some of the opportunities this has thrown up. So I just want to get together a collection of business owners, leaders, thought leaders, that to bring their experience and their knowledge across multiple industries. Because again, if we can share some of these, what we see as pain points, as well as what some of the strategies could be to address this, we've got a few people already that volunteered to come along. I think it's exciting. A lot of ideas were floating around as well, because I think that, and certainly some of the ideas we've thought about, just one was like, if you bring onshore work back onshore, offshore work back onshore. Other one is going that in the past you've had, around recessions, governments have invested mass amounts, lots of money into infrastructure products, roads, bridges, rail. Now that's great for keeping people busy and creating work, but you can't export that at the end of it. So if you were to do similar investments into the digital economy and services economy in New Zealand, you're going to be, because of some big problems we've got on the digital side of government and for New Zealand itself. If we could crack some of those problems, it positions New Zealand very well, keeps an important sector going, as well as growth and export opportunities as well.
Nice. And if anyone wants to, I think you mentioned the date for that is May 6th as an initial session. If anyone wants to join that, what's the best way to do that?
Just connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll kind of get you involved in the discussion.
Nice. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've shared your perspective, Garry, on the current challenges facing business, the impact that automation can have on productivity, and the resilience and jobs for New Zealand. It's been an awesome conversation. Thank you for your time.
And thank you, Russell.
This has been the second podcast in a special 3-part content series. If you missed the first part, which addressed the growth in the global RPA market, we're going to drop a link into the show notes. And next week, we will be delving into how to drive short-term benefit using automation with Adam Taylor. Thanks, guys.